Glossophobia, more commonly known as fear of public speaking, is the third most common phobia in the UK. For most people, it ranks even more highly than fear of clowns, which I find difficult to believe. And for some, it even ranks more highly than the fear of death itself. My name's Joe, and for the last 10 years, I've been a professional magician. I also run a management consultancy here in the UK. Every year, I give hundreds of talks, presentations, and performances, and I'm always trying to improve my public speaking. Over the years, I've made so many catastrophic errors, and particularly at the beginning of my career, I wish I had somebody to say to me, yeah, don't do that because it's going to put the audience to sleep, or you seem pretty nervous, maybe you should try this and it might make you feel a little bit better. In this video, I'm going to share 7 really common public speaking mistakes that I see people make all the time, and I feel perfectly entitled to point them out because I myself have made them in the past. Along the way, I'll offer up some advice, most of which is stuff I've been given by my mentors over the years. And I promise, if you spot yourself making some of these mistakes and putting even some of this advice into practice, will help you to level up your public speaking game immediately. If that sounds useful to you, then let's get stuck in. Number 1, got to turn up on time. Well, obviously, you got to turn up on time. But as the saying goes, to be early is to be on time is to be late, and to be late is inexcusable. And in the case of public speaking, never was this saying more true. On so many occasions, you see people walk on stage and they're just confused by the setup. Ha! Where do I put my water? Shit, I don't know how to make the mic stand work. Ah, the lights are really bright. I can't see. Immediately, we're off to a bad start and the audience is unsettled. Regardless of the occasion, make sure you get there early. Figure out how you're going to get on and off stage. Learn how to use the mic stand, do a sound check so you know people at the back of the room will be able to hear you. And if you're going to be using lights, then get somebody to turn those on so you know what it feels like and you don't feel like a literal deer in the headlights when you walk on stage for the first time. A little bit of preparation goes a long way. Fixating on nerves. This is definitely something that I used to be guilty of, and public speaking anxiety is a real thing. So being nervous and having a bit of stage fright is totally normal. But in my case, fixating on all the things that could go wrong just made things worse. It didn't help me in any way, shape, or form. There's loads of advice out there on how to deal with stage fright, but the thing that's made the biggest difference to me is a tiny little piece of advice by Andy Nyman, the actor and magician. He's actually the guy that wrote a lot of Darren Brown's shows, which is almost just a psychological trick, really. If you're feeling nervous, then just reframe those nerves as excitement. Now, I don't know if it'll work for you, but this one little piece of advice completely changed my relationship to stage fright. Apologizing for yourself. Oh God, I hate this. So this is really common. People walk on stage and they start by apologizing for themselves. Maybe they apologize for their nerves or for their lack of experience and preparation. Maybe it's for the quality of their slides or that they're not somebody else. I wish I could say that doing this endears you to an audience, but unless they've got a real vested interest in your success, then all it does is just make them feel really uncomfortable. And when an audience feels uncomfortable, they can't actually pay attention to what you're saying because they're more focused on their own discomfort. If you fall into this trap, what can you do instead? A better approach is just to walk out on stage, hit your mark, look out at the audience, smile, take a deep breath and begin. And just that deep breath alone will say to the audience, it's going to be fine. There's a horse outside. This is living in the countryside for you. Poor eye contact with the audience. Most people's tendency is just to stare out in front of them or maybe to look down at notes and periodically up at the audience. And this isn't ideal. We want to try and make eye contact with an audience. But why is this important? Well, people who've been in the audiences of some of the best public speakers on the planet will swear that at periods they were talking directly to them. And they remember that connection for the rest of their lives. If you've got a large group of people, how do you make them feel that you're making a direct connection with them? You want to imagine an hourglass shape over the top of the audience. And over the course of your talk, you trace your eyes along the hourglass in a Z-shaped pattern. When you get to the end, you can either go back the other way or you can do a reverse Z shape. If you do that a few times over the course of your speech, you will touch pretty much every corner of the audience and you'll create the illusion that you're making eye contact with every single one of them. Hey, if you are enjoying this video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, because if nothing else, it'll give me some encouragement to keep making these things. And hey, we all need a bit of that sometimes. Let's get back to it. Start with process. A really common piece of advice from the business world is to tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. This advice is logical, and I think that's why it's endured for so long, but it doesn't actually guarantee that people will pay attention, and it can be a bit of a recipe for a really boring opening. It's way more interesting to start with some kind of hook. It could be a statistic, it could be a quote, Maybe it's an anecdote, something that piques the audience's attention right from the very beginning. Now, regardless of what kind of public speaking you're doing, one really cool storytelling trick you can use here, which I got from Matthew Dix's book, Storyworthy, is to start with some kind of forward momentum. If you think about all the Hollywood movies you've seen that start with a helicopter moving towards Manhattan, or maybe a car driving down the freeway with a family in it, or somebody walking up to a front door. When directors use this technique, you can't help but place yourself in the story and wonder, where are we going? Using this technique does take a bit of practice, but if you start with some forward momentum, then you will have your audience hooked from the very beginning. End with a recap. Much like the last mistake, this is perfectly logical. It doesn't actually mean that it's effective, because people rarely remember what you say, but they do remember how you make them feel. So rather than ending with some kind of recap of what you've said, a more effective strategy is to end with a moment of change, something that's changed within you as a consequence of the message that you've been sharing. Even though people might not remember exactly what you said, they will remember how you made them feel, and that will stick with them long after your speech is over. Giving up too soon. In the spirit of not ending with a recap, I will end with a moment of change. For me, in 2017, I was sat in the club room of the Magic Circle. It's a private members club for magicians based in London. And I was complaining to Tom Whitestone, who, as it happens, is probably the greatest living close-up magician on the planet, about a really bad run of shows that I'd had. And after I finished whinging about my bad luck, he said, "Did I tell you about the time that Terri Rogers played Ronnie Scott's?" "Go on." "I'll do Tom." Terri was a ventriloquist, difficult word to say, who was really popular in the 1980s. And one night I was hanging out at Ronnie Scott's world famous jazz club, and the MC comes over the microphone and says, "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, headlining the bill, Terri Rogers." People were there to listen to jazz, so you can imagine how impressed people were when Terri walks out with her arm buried up to the elbow in the backside of a doll. But a total pro, she begins her act to zero applause. 5 minutes in, nobody's cracked a smile. Minute 7, there's a chuckle at the back. Minute 8, cackle in the wings. Minute 9, a big belly laugh from a group at the foot of the stage. By minute 10, the whole audience eating out the palm of her hand. Why am I telling you this? Well, I realized that I was having such a bad run of shows, not because my act was bad, but because I was kind of giving up on myself and on the audience. It's easy to get inside your own head when you're doing any kind of public speaking. Maybe the audience seems disinterested, or perhaps they don't laugh at a joke you thought was hilarious, and very quickly you just assume that you're dying. So you hold back a bit to protect yourself, you become a bit more timid, and you don't commit the message that you've come there to share. The reality is, you've got no idea what they're thinking. Maybe you're dying, maybe you aren't. But if you commit from beginning to end, then more often than not, you'll be pleasantly surprised that what you mistook for indifference was actually just rapt attention. But if you give up partway through, then you can't blame your audience for doing the same thing. Now, it goes without saying that all the tips in this video are kind of meaningless unless you've put in the effort to write something compelling and to rehearse it to the point that it's natural and authentic. If you're looking for a process to help you do exactly that, then you should check out the video in the card above, because I have made one on exactly that subject. And if you got some value from this video, then I'd really appreciate if you gave it a like, because it will help other people who are also trying to improve their public speaking to find this information. Catch you in the next one.